right, we are back, and we were just getting out of a heated holiday Christmas movie debate in the commercial break. Obviously, we're having a great time here tonight with our Christmas theme, and we're going to talk more about Christmas movies with our next guest as we head into our final leg of our Canadian NHL preview tour, and we head to La Belle Province, Max, as we're going to talk about Les Habitants with our good friend Joey Alfieri from TSN 690. Joey, how are you doing tonight? Thanks for joining us.
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we're talking Christmas movies. We were talking about it in the break a little bit earlier in the show. If you had a go-to, or you had a top three or top two, what are some of the Christmas movies you enjoy going to in the holiday season?
Yeah, man, I haven't seen either one of them yet, but I'll go Home Alone 1. The first one's pretty good. Makes me laugh still. And I'm a sucker for Arnold Schwarzenegger's cheesy lines, so I don't mind Jingle All the Way either. I think there's some quality lines in there.
Oh yeah,
yeah. The cookies. They don't touch my cookies.
Yeah, that's a good one. I say that one all year. I roll with that line all year.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a really good one. And I always forget about Jingle All the Way, but it's a great one. So hey, let's jump right into it. We got so much hockey news going on right now. This is our first episode where there's actually officially a season happening. So we've done 3 weeks of episodes where we're just hoping, and finally we got something sort of official here. We don't have a schedule, but we're feeling pretty good about it, I would think. So let's jump into it. We're just going to put a little graphic over your face here, Joey, so don't mind. There it is.
Good. Go ahead.
So this is our off-season recap, if you will. The Canadiens come into the season with a few changes, a few significant changes, but overall, quantity-wise, not a ton. They finished last season with a 31-31-9 record. They come in with a little bit of cap flexibility compared to some teams who have zero. They have $383-ish. $1,000. So obviously the big move is they added Jake Allen, Tyler Toffoli comes over, Josh Anderson in the big Max Domi trade, which we will get into. Joel Edmondson is added on the blue line, and Alex Romanov. And then subtractions, like I said, Max Domi's a big name in terms of name, but the rest kind of just filler pieces, more or less. Thomas Tatar obviously led the team in scoring last year, and they picked Caden Gooley with their first pick in the draft, this past draft. Let's bring Joey back in now, Jordan. So, Joey, when I go over those names, again, there's not a ton compared to some of the other Canadian teams, but when I go over those names, who makes the biggest impact, either subtraction or addition for you?
Well, I think if you look at it, I really like the Tyler Toffoli signing. I like his age, I like the term, I like the money on the deal. You're still, you've got him for 4 years. I think he's 28, and he's been very, very productive. I think he's going to help out on a power play that struggled the last couple of years. So I'm a big fan of the Toffoli move. I like the Josh Anderson, Max Domi trade. I think you've got to give to get, and I think Max Domi's a good player. But with Anderson, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, it's just with Anderson, there's question marks, right? And I think everyone was enamored with the trade because the Canadiens have been looking for that power forward for a number of years, a guy who can, be physical and chip in 25, 26, 27 goals. But he's coming off shoulder surgery. It's been a year since he's played. And I think a lot more of the fan base fell out of love a little bit with the trade just when they saw the terms of the deal. They gave him a 7-year deal at big money. So that's, that kind of soured people's opinion on the move, but I think you'll be fine, but there's definitely some question marks there.
Yeah, so just to build on that, obviously that was kind of the big deal of the offseason, if you will, and the Canadiens aren't shy of doing offseason big moves, and we'll get into that later because you have a question about Bergevin, but just in terms of Josh Anderson, obviously he's kind of a polarizing figure because he comes off a great season a couple years ago and gets a goal, and he's injury-riddled the next year. So they obviously committed a lot to him, Joey. They gave him 7 years, like you said, and a lot of money. Are they going to give him kind of top six, top line a role, or are they going to kind of, temper it a little bit?
I wouldn't be surprised. You made this move, and it's an important one. Not to say the Toffoli one's not important, but you traded the guy who led your team in scoring 2 seasons ago for this player, and then you've given him the long-term deal. So in my mind, you want to put him in a position to succeed. I think this is just the way I think they'll open the season. The Danault, Tatar, Gallagher line, I think will start together, and eventually maybe it'll change. But that line has had a lot of success the last couple of regular seasons. If you look at the advanced numbers, at 5-on-5, they're flat out dominant. So I think that line stays the same. But I think if you want to put Josh Anderson in a position to succeed, whenever you want somebody to get going offensively, especially in the second half of the year last year and in the playoffs, you put them next to Nick Suzuki. Nick Suzuki he's been the catalyst. He was their best forward in the return to play. He's been really, really good. And I think a lot of the offensive burden is going to fall on Suzuki in the second year. And I think if you want to put Josh Anderson in a position to succeed, you put him next to Nick Suzuki. Now, the thing is, though, I tell you the same thing about Jonathan Drouin. Very polarizing guy. He's not the play driver that people thought he would be. And to me, if I want to get Jonathan Drouin started on the right foot, I want to put him next to Nick Suzuki too. But Nick Suzuki's not going to be able to babysit these guys, right? Like, these guys are going to have to pull their own weight. They're going to have to do, what's expected of them. But I wouldn't be surprised if, the guys, like you said, that are a little more polarizing, I'd put them with Nick Suzuki just because everybody looks good next to Nick Suzuki.
Yeah, it's not too often you get the teenage babysitter babysitting the 25-year-olds. Right. But yeah, Max, you go ahead here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know about you, Joey, but I love that the Habs now seem to have a true tandem in net, right? The Jake Allen acquisition, it was a great pickup that in today's game you quite frankly need, right? And again, going into a 50-game season, no matter how long a season is, it's important to have two guys that can kind of carry the load, so to speak. How do you see that split maybe working down the stretch here? And again, we talk about down the stretch because it's kind of a sprint to the end of the season between Price and Allen as the Habs go into the 2021 campaign.
Yeah, I think the Canadiens realized, and look, they've been searching for a backup goalie for a couple of years now. Like they went with Kincaid a couple of years ago. It didn't work. Last year, their backup goalie position was a sore spot for them. I think they got like 2 wins from their backup goalies. They really needed Carey Price to play regularly. And I think you saw between March and August, when he had all that time off, he was fresh for the playoffs. He was flat out dominant. So I think to them, they knew, but this confirmed the idea that they had to go out and get themselves a backup goalie. Do they commit a lot of money to their goaltending position? Yeah, Carey Price at 10.5. Jake Allen's at 4 or 4.5, I think, for this year. And then he signed the extension for the next couple of years that'll bring the cap hit down. But for this year, it's about $15 million to goaltending, which is quite a bit. But I think you see what the upside is if you keep Carey Price fresh. And I think that's what the mindset's going to be. That's what the goal is. And in fairness to Jake Allen, he had his struggles as a starting goaltender, but in the last couple of years when he took a back seat to Binnington, he took over as a starter in the playoffs last year. So I think it's a nice fit. I wouldn't be surprised if he played the equivalent to, whatever 30 games over 82 is that 18 or 20 games out of 56? I wouldn't be surprised if he played that many, especially if there's going to be back-to-backs and a condensed schedule. So I think Carey Price is going to get a lot more rest than he has necessarily in years past. But I think that's a good thing, especially if you can get into the playoffs. Then, of course, if the Canadiens are in a battle, and I think they will be, if the Habs are in a battle for that final playoff spot or the last 2 playoff spots in the North Division, then I think down the stretch you'll probably see Carey Price's workload ramp up. But if they're somewhat comfortable in that 2-3 spot, then I think that you'll see that nice balance of Price, Allen, Price, Allen.
So one thing that came out the other day, and I just got reminded of it, but teams are going to be required to have 3 goalies with them at all times. So does Caden Primo fit into that spot, or is there somebody else in the depth chart that sits in there?
Yeah, probably not Caden Primo, just because I think they want him to play in the American Hockey League, and I'm assuming that the American Hockey League is going to start up again at some point. He's a young goaltender in his early 20s. I think they want to get him game action. I think the guy who's perfectly suited for the taxi squad, I think it's going to be Charlie Lindgren. He's a guy, he's not an NHL goalie. He's, very good in the American Hockey League. I think he's right in between. And I think he's at that stage where he's a little bit older in his development, and he kind of is what he is right now. I don't know that there's a ton more upside there. So if he has to sit for a while, or if they quarantine a goalie like NFL teams are quarantining a quarterback, I think it should probably be Charlie Lindgren. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's on a one-way deal. So they've got to pay him the $700K no matter what. So you might as well have him around, have him traveling with the team. And if something happens to Price, they'll be in trouble either way. But if something happens to Allen, at least, you have somebody who's played in NHL games before.
It's a great year to be a veteran free agent goalie right now. There's a lot of extra spots, it seems, this year. Now, speaking of the blue line, we're going on the defensive group here now. Obviously, they add Joel Edmondson this year, big physical guy on the back end, former Moose Jaw Warrior, I might add. And Alex Romanov comes over, of course, what is he, 23, 24-year-old Russian
He's younger
sensation.
than that.
Is he younger than that, 21, 22?
He's 20 or 21, 20. Yeah.
Wow. So he comes over as a guy with a lot of hype around him. But then they brought in Ben Sherratt not too long ago. They're turning into a blue line that's big, physical, hard to play against. Probably one of the hardest to play against groups in at least the Canadian division, which is official, by the way, as well. We talked about that earlier. But what's your assessment right now of this group, maybe short-term and long-term?
Yeah, look, I think it's a good question. I think you mentioned it. They have become a lot more rugged over the last couple of years. They want to be tougher to play against. They want those guys who hopefully aren't going to break down and can play that playoff style. They've got that with Weber. You mentioned Edmondson and Sherratt as well. They can all play that game. From the limited amount of time that I've seen Romanov, i.e. at the World Junior Hockey Championships, where he's flat out dominant, he can throw his weight around too. I think they're a little light when it comes to puck movers. Like Jeff Petry's a really good puck mover. Victor Mete is as well. But I'm just, what I'm curious to see with Romanov is, how high does he get into the lineup, right? Like from everything that we've heard, he's terrific and they expect him to make an impact as soon as this year and they expect him to play in the top six. And I think he'll probably, they've committed, once they signed Edmondson, they said that Edmondson is likely to start with Petry. Sherratt and Weber played together for most of last year. So that kind of leaves Romanov with maybe a Victor Mete or a Brett Kulak on the third pairing to start. So I think you'll see Romanov start there. But he's the wild card in all of this. Is, if he acclimates, if he gets himself used to the NHL play and he's starting to stand out and Claude Julien can trust him to play bigger and bigger minutes, then he can go up as high as, maybe playing with Shea Weber in the second half of the year. I think that's asking a bit much. But I think they've spoken about, they're that high on him. They really feel like he's a good player. So I'm curious to see just how good he is. But for sure, this team, they've got a number one defenseman or top pairing defenseman in Weber. Jeff Petry, I think, is the most underrated defenseman in the league. And they've got a good group. It's a deep group. And we haven't even spoken about Noah Juleson, who's still young, former first-round pick. A guy who, since he got hit in the face with the puck, has had headache and post-concussion syndrome issues. But, he's another guy who has a lot of upside. He can play that right side. And if he's healthy, he's a guy who can make an impact on that blue line too. And
Cale Fleury, I might add.
Yeah.
Cale Fleury, former Regina
Cale Fleury's another one of those guys. I wouldn't want to put him on the taxi squad just because I'd like him to play some minutes in the American Hockey League. I want him to be ready in case there's an injury. But fair. He's very good, yeah.
Absolutely. And talked about it, obviously, too, there, Joey. Shea Weber, the obvious linchpin of that Montreal Canadiens D. I'm fairly familiar with him, being a big Nashville Predators fan myself. Yeah. But the mileage has been a bit of a question mark since he came over in that trade. He had a relatively healthy season last year, but the years previous, he was starting to show his age a little bit. And that mileage, obviously, that he's earned over a long, long NHL career. But since his time in La Belle Province, he's established himself as again, the Habs' second most important player, arguably, to Carey Price. Can you speak to the identity that he brings to this team when he's fully healthy and firing on all cylinders?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think even when he's not, I think he, even in the last couple of years when he hasn't been healthy, he's been around the guys. He's made the road trips, and he's, he doesn't only wear the captaincy on the jersey. It's not just a title for him. You can tell that he takes it very, very seriously, and he does lead by example. So with Shea Weber, especially, they've got a lot of young guys that have been around the team. Guys like Jolson, guys like Mete, guys like Kulak, and they seem to all rally around him. And he's been terrific. I know that was a trade a few years ago that was as polarizing a trade as I've covered since I've been doing this job, and people still talk about it to this day. But, they're very different, Subban and Weber, but there's no denying the impact on the ice when he's been healthy and to the culture of the team. I mean, Shea Weber's been terrific. And you saw, again, once he got those 5 months off, he was fresh. He played a lot of the hard minutes in the playoffs when they came back. He's a big reason why they were able to beat Pittsburgh. was a big reason why they were able to push Philadelphia. He's the linchpin. He's the linchpin back there, and I think that there's term left on that deal, and the Canadiens need him to continue to be an important part of this club, and hopefully he can stay healthy for them because he's an important part of it, and that defense isn't the same when he's not on it. And I think Weber's been as advertised. It's just a question of staying healthy, like you said. There are the hard miles on him, but I think that's also why they went out and got themselves some added depth on the blue line, is because there's some nights where, the minutes are going to be spread out pretty evenly, and you need quality guys to do that on your second and third pairing. So that's why they've gone out and they've addressed the depth on defense. They want to maybe rotate guys in and out, keep guys fresh, and hopefully maybe keep the minutes down for Weber as the season progresses and, hopefully leading into the playoffs.
So speaking of Cale Fleury, we had him on the Rod Pedersen show. I don't know when it was. It was just after the bubble was over, I'm pretty sure. He had him and his brother Hayden. They were both on at the same time. And we asked Cale, what do you think about Shea Weber? Like, obviously, what's he like to you? And he said, well, he's obviously a huge mentor, but he also provided his welcome to the NHL moment, trying to block a slap shot on penalty kill practice. So wouldn't want to be in those shoes.
No, not at all. That shot's heavy. That shot.
Yeah, a little bit. So another thing that's going on right now.
It's serious. It's no joke.
Yeah, another thing that's going on right now, we lost your video, but you'll come back. We can still talk. With the World Juniors coming on this week, obviously that's kind of one thing that we're talking about a lot. We got the Hockey Canada helmet on our desk here. We got 3 Canadiens prospects coming into the tournament: Jan Mysak, Caden Gooley, and Cole Caulfield. So with all those guys, obviously different levels of impact probably for their teams, but what are your thoughts on the 3 prospects going into the tournament this weekend?
Yeah, I just saw that Mysak, impressive. As an 18-year-old, he's been named captain of the Czech team, which is pretty cool. I saw him a little bit with the Hamilton Bulldogs in the OHL. Everything we've heard, he's a very talented player. Still obviously likely a couple of years away. With Caden Gooley, same deal. I think on a lot of other teams, the guy would probably be a top pairing defenseman, but playing on Canada, I think the minutes are going to be somewhat limited, but he's going to bring that physicality. And look, he still has another year of eligibility in the tournament, I believe, next year. So I'd like to see him, just solid. It doesn't necessarily have to stand out for the right or wrong reasons, but I'm expecting to watch him very closely, and I'm hoping that he can justify the selection. At least right now, the Canadiens invested the 16th overall pick in him, and the guy that I'm really keeping a close eye on is Cole Caulfield. Like, Caulfield has to bounce back after a very mediocre World Junior. I know the Americans weren't super impressive last year, but I was expecting Caulfield to chip in offensively more than he did. And now that he's a year older, this is it. This is his last year of World Junior eligibility. I think Canadiens fans are expecting him to put up some significant numbers in the round robin portion. And as they continue to, if the Americans continue to advance, I think Cole Caulfield has to be a big part of their success. It'll be a little disappointing if he flames out of a World Junior like he did last year. I think the expectations are fairly high for this player this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we'll be keeping a close eye on him. Obviously, Canada and the U.S. rivalry, it's going to be pretty interesting to watch to see if they meet in a medal round type of situation. But Joey, I'm curious, with the season finally being announced on the weekend, hooray, that's awesome. We're super excited about it. I've heard some rumblings. Is Marc Bergevin done? I know that there's obviously, we alluded to it earlier, only about 300 and some grand and change in cap space, but he's a GM that's notably creative in this league. Is there possibly something that could happen before puck drop on January 13th, which from what we're hearing is looking like it's going to be against the Toronto Maple Leafs? So do you think there's anything up Bergevin's sleeve prior to puck drop, or is it going to stay pretty quiet?
Yeah, I saw that report too. I'm looking at the depth chart right now, and I know general managers will always tell you, like, hey, if we can improve the squad, we will. But the thing is, it's just, I don't see any openings. Like, would it be great to bring in a guy like Mike Hoffman to help the power play? For sure. But where are you going to put him? Like on the right side, you're loaded. You've got Gallagher, you've got Anderson, you've got Toffoli, who could maybe play both sides. You've got Yoel Armia on the left side. You've got Tatar, who led you in scoring. You have Jonathan Drouin, who's going to play there. You have Paul Byron. You have Arturi Lehkonen. Like, I don't see where the openings are there. And on defense, we've talked about the depth on defense. So unless somebody's going out and somebody's coming in, you're upgrading that way. That's fine. But I don't know if I would do anything with the Canadiens outside of, maybe bring somebody in on a PTO, like a veteran fourth line center. I think that's the big battle, believe it or not, heading into training camp is it going to be Ryan Poehling? You guys have it right there. Is it going to be Ryan Poehling on the fourth line, or is it going to be a kid like Jake Evans? Like one of those two guys is going to center the fourth line. And in the playoffs, it was Jake Evans. Ryan Poehling didn't sniff the ice in the bubble. So are the Canadiens comfortable with that? I would think so. I'd like for them to give one of the kids an opportunity to prove themselves. But if they want to do something, if they want to upgrade somewhere, maybe they can do something at fourth line, bring in a guy on a PTO. But even then, like to crack this team on a PTO, they might be light on superstars up front. They might not have an offensive difference maker like a lot of the other teams in the division, but they're as deep as anybody else in the division. So cracking this team on a PTO when there is no preseason games is not going to be easy. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the Canadiens are a team that for the last several years have seemed to lack that offensive star. And there was a lot of rumors that, the Patrick Laine deal might go down earlier in the summer. We don't know where that's at exactly now, but let's say that they're out on Patrick Laine. Who's the next guy? You mentioned Nick Suzuki earlier. Is he a type of guy who might be able to become that kind of franchise forward for this team, or is there somebody else in the wings?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think Suzuki's the one. I don't think he's going to be your prototypical superstar, 90, 95, 100-point player. But based on what I've seen and, what I saw in year one, I wouldn't be surprised if he developed into a point-per-game, two-way center. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he was an 80-point guy who's so smart that he can play really at a high level at both ends of the rink. I still have high hopes for Jesperi Kotkaniemi. I know he's penciled in on the third line on the depth chart right now, but he's a guy who scored some big goals in the playoffs for the Canadiens. And after a really disappointing second year, people forget, he was demoted to the minors, but in his first year as an 18-year-old rookie, a guy who really hadn't filled out at all playing center, and really, he didn't really get much power play time that rookie year. He still put up a respectable 34 points. You're talking about a guy who did make a difference for the Canadiens in that year. So I think Kotkaniemi and Suzuki, those two guys are the future. If they end up being, the 1A and 1B down the middle, that's the 1-2 punch, the depth at center that the Canadiens haven't had. And I know Phil Deneau is a third-line center, and he's the older guy of the group, and he's a pending UFA. You're talking about a guy who's really underappreciated, even in this market. But I know offense doesn't come as easily to him, but he still had 50 points last year. He's a guy who got Selke votes. In my mind, he's a guy that they have to find a way to bring back. But I certainly understand why he wouldn't want to take a hometown discount, just because if he hits the market, I think there's going to be no shortage of suitors. Guys are going to be, teams are going to be lining up to pay a guy like Phil Deneau who can play the penalty kill and can chip in more or less offensively. He's not a play driver. He's not the guy who's going to create the most offense. But if you put him with two, good wingers like Gallagher and Tatar, he's shown that he can hit, 12, 13 goals, and he can hit the 50-point mark.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess from those guys to the man that's going to be leading them this year, Claude Julien. He's in his second stint with the team going into his fifth season this go-around. What about his message, Joey, still resonates with specifically this group going into the 2021 season for the Habitants?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you look at the way they came out in the playoffs. It's been a tough couple of years where they haven't made the playoffs, but they got that second lease on life in August. And you can tell, I mean, the rookies had gotten better, and the guys had, the guys around them had gotten healthier. And, people were starting to think like, Claude Julien, maybe they've tuned him out. They had a couple of 8-game losing streaks during the regular season last year. And it seemed like he was on very thin ice, but they stuck with him. They had success. They went around. They won the play-in. They went around. So I think the Canadiens need to make the playoffs this year. And it's going to be tough because it is a division where the teams are very much equal. But at the same time, I don't want to say the coach is on thin ice, but I do think that you got to avoid the 8-game losing streaks, obviously, this year. Like, I don't think they allow it to get to 4, 5, 6-game losing streak, because then I think that he's going to be on even thinner ice. And they've got Kirk Muller. I know he doesn't speak French, but he took over when Claude Julien had the heart attack in the playoffs, and he did reasonably well. And he's an outside the box type of thinker. I don't know if that's a way that they would lean, but I would think that if they had another long losing streak, then you could see Claude Julien out. But I think the way this team is built, I think they'll be fine. I think they'll play well in their own end. They'll be better than they were a year ago, especially because a lot of the young guys have come back and they're stronger, they're older, and they're ready for bigger roles, in my opinion, plus the additions that we talked about at the beginning. I think this is going to be a good team. I don't think Claude Julien is in danger unless things go south, but I don't think they're going to go south. I think Canes are going to be okay.
Awesome.
That's great to hear. We got two more for you here. Kind of a lightning round scenario. We ask everybody so far on this preview tour that we've gone through the reverse retro jersey. Now, the Canadiens, in our minds, is at least top half nice, top half of the league. What's it been like? What's the reception in Montreal? And what do you think about them?
The old people hate them. The young people love them.
There we go.
So I guess you guys are young people, and I guess I'm a young person too. Because I personally, I like it. I wasn't as fired up about it either way. I think it's a cool look. It's cool the Canadiens are going to go with blue as their primary color. And I like it. I mean, I have no issue with it, and I certainly understand why the league is doing it. They're trying to make some more money for their teams after the way 2020 went. I'm cool with it, but for the most part, and of course there's exceptions to the rule here, but for the most part, the old guys think that it's too similar to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and how dare you go with that color scheme? The young people think they're fire.
I think I tweeted it at you, but the Spokane Chiefs have a very similar jersey, so I've been seeing it for years.
You did tweet me that, yeah. The Spokane Chiefs responded to that tweet too, I think.
Yes, they're very active. They're good. They're good guys over there.
Awesome.
It's tough with the Canadiens though, because they're obviously one of, if not the most traditional team in terms of their jersey. They haven't changed much, so for them to do anything different would have been probably riveting for those older fans. But I think they kept it pretty classy. From what some of the other teams did, I think they kept it pretty classy.
Absolutely.
Now, the other thing we've asked all the analysts so far, and everyone's been pretty timid so far, so feel free to boast a little bit here, but Canadian division, prediction time. Where do the Canadiens finish in the division?
You want a hot take?
Yes, please.
I think they finish ahead of Toronto.
Oh, I like it.
Yep.
I think they finish ahead of Toronto, and I'll give you the simple reason. I think that in a 56-game sample where the schedule is condensed, this is my opinion. I don't normally feel I think the Canadiens are not, they don't have the star power that the Maple Leafs have. I think if you look at the Maple Leafs' top 3 forwards, maybe even top 4, they would be, if you put them on the Canadiens, they would be the best forward on the Montreal Canadiens. There's no doubt about that. But I think in terms of depth, both up front, on defense, and I mean even in goal, if you want to add that position too, I think the Canadiens are deeper. I still think this is assuming Vancouver plays in Vancouver. I think it'll be Vancouver first. I think Montreal second, Toronto third, and I'm really torn between the two Alberta teams. I'm sorry to do this to Winnipeg. I love Winnipeg, but I think Calgary, I'm high on Calgary. I like what they did this offseason. I think their guys will bounce back. And I have a hard time saying that Connor McDavid's not going to make the playoffs. Leon Draisaitl is not going to make the playoffs. So I'm kind of on the fence there, but that's my hot take. The Toronto Maple Leafs are going to finish behind the Montreal Canadiens.
I love it. So you're saying second?
Second for Montreal, yeah.
Okay,
I like it.
That's good, because literally everybody else except for Matthew Barnaby, who was talking with us about the Senators, because that's obvious. Everyone's pretty sure that the Senators are going to be last. Sorry, Ottawa. But everyone's pretty much said, I think third, fourth, somewhere in there. And I'm like, can somebody please say something different? So the fact that you said second is fantastic.
Love it, Joey.
Yeah.
So thank you, Joey.
The odds are probably not on my side, but yeah, I'm going with the depth in a 56-game sample is going to prevail over the top end talent.
I like it, and you know what? I kind of had that thought too. I was earlier. We did our predictions way back in October for the Canadian division when it was just a fledgling rumor, and now that it's a real thing, I think we're going to redo it. And the more I think about it, I'm kind of joining on your side there. As a Leafs fan, I will admit I'm pretty high on the team right now, but the Canadiens, I love their depth, like you said, and it's scaring me a little bit. So we'll see. We'll see. It's a very interesting year, and we're all looking forward to it. So thank you for joining us today.
Merci beaucoup, Joey.
Yes, for talking the Habs, and let's do it again down the road, maybe once the season kicks off.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. Anytime you need me, I'm there.